Welcome to the Fantasy's Finest Fantasy Football Podcast. Here are your hosts, William Spencer, Jalen McQueen, and Mark Carter.
What's going on, Finest fans? We got another brand new episode of the Fantasy's Finest Podcast here for you. Man, week 6 is in the books. I don't know how you guys feel about week 6, but some of the games had me a little tight. And here's why. I had several players in good positions to have good or decent games, and they ended up having some kind of floppers. Like, I'll give you an example. Darren Waller. Can someone explain to me why Mike McDaniels thought it was a good idea to throw to him just 3 times the entire game? You don't have Tyreek Hill anymore. He's on injury reserve. He's out for the season. You have Jalen Waddle, who is a good receiver, but that's all you got. You throw the ball 6 times or 6+ times to Devon Achane throughout the whole game, and you don't even look Darren Waller's way for much of the game, and then you end up losing. I don't know what goes through some of these guys, some of these coaches' heads when you're not using the players that are right there in front of you. You refuse to use your weapons for whatever reason. I don't get it. And it's also frustrating because I got these boys on my fantasy team. Like, I'll give you another one. James Cook. Can someone please tell me why James Cook isn't used in the passing game? The last 2 games, James Cook has not really been involved in the passing game. Why not? For whatever reason, the Bills' offensive coordinator loves Ray Davis in passing situations. They'll use James Cook between the 20 and the 20. And as soon as they get into the red zone, James Cook comes out the game. Why? Didn't you guys just pay him? Didn't you guys y'all just gave James Cook a new contract? Why don't y'all use him in the red zone more often? He's one of your best weapons on offense. You don't have any receivers. You don't have a number 1 wide receiver. So if you don't have a number 1 wide receiver and Josh Allen is just, spreading it around, why not give James Cook some targets? Like, James Cook was, now, to be fair, Atlanta, their defense is legit. They're very good against the run. They're very good against running back so far for fantasy football. But to not utilize, and James Cook was averaging over 4.5 yards per attempt or better. Throw him a couple passes. You throwing a Joshua Palmer out there. Keon Coleman didn't get anything. He didn't have a great game. Khalil Shakir, he's decent. But, I mean, you can't throw James Cook a couple, chuck him a couple passes. Like, it was frustrating. I lost a couple of games like that because of James Cook's lack of involvement in the passing game. And I know if my friend Drake is watching this, he's laughing because I played against him that week, in week 6, and I could have won that game if James Cook was a little bit more involved in the passing game. But that's neither here nor there. But we got a good episode for you guys. We're going to be talking about some waiver wire options for week 7. I'm going to give you my fantasy league wrap up for week 6. And then we're going to take care of you guys and get you guys set, put some waiver claims in, and give you some options to target off the waiver wire this week, heading into week 7. So as always, make sure that you subscribe to the Fantasy's Finest podcast on our YouTube channel. You can also check us out on Spotify or Apple Podcasts as well. Make sure you leave some comments on the video, on the podcast episodes on our YouTube channel as well. You can also follow us on social media at FF Phinest on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, wherever you get your flavor for social media, we are there. And our accounts are doing pretty well. We just cracked 500 on our Facebook page. The TikTok is still going strong. YouTube channel is still going strong. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Help us out. Make us grow. And we're going to keep the fantasy football content coming. But quick recap for my week, for week 6. 12-6 across all of my fantasy leagues. Now, I know you might think, yo, why do you have so many fantasy leagues? I've told you guys before, I have a problem. But I love playing fantasy football, so I get into as many leagues as I can handle for the year, and I have a system. So if y'all want to know, I'll do a little quick episode about what I use or how I manage that many teams for fantasy football. But I did pretty good this week. 12-6 across all my fantasy leagues. That includes surviving another week in my guillotine league. 5-1 in my sleeper league. My full transparency, my Scott Fishbowl team, it's so garbage this year. Between injuries, loss of players, and for whatever reason, I decided, you know what, this is the year I'm going to take a chance on Joe Burrow. Yeah, so you know how that's working out. Joe Burrow down, CeeDee Lamb down. I think I lost 2 running backs. It's just not going well for me in the Scott Fishbowl this year. But all the other ones, my home leagues, I survived. Like I said, I survived another week in a guillotine league. Shout out to Baker Mayfield because I picked you up after one of the other teams got chopped. I spent like I think 150 fab to get Baker Mayfield on my team, and he's got me through it. Hopefully, I get Mike Evans back, and I can chop it up with a Mike Evans Baker Mayfield stack in my guillotine league. That would be nice. The only fantasy app that gave me trouble this week was Yahoo. 0-3 across my fantasy teams in there. I could not buy a win. I lost by 2 points in one game. I lost by 10 in another. And then I got blown out. I got cooked in one in the other league. So I couldn't buy a win there. But CBS, 2-0. And in NFL fantasy, I went 3-1. I do have a couple teams that are under 500. They're like 2-4. I don't have any outside of my Scott Fishbowl, I don't have any offers. So no 0-6 teams. I do have like maybe 4 2-4 teams, but I think I'm turning them around. I'm on a win streak in a couple of them, so that's a good sign. Keep it going. Always got to be active on the waiver wire, and you always got to be ready to make a trade. So that's just a little tidbit that I try and live by. So that way I'm not, it's not an all hope is lost type situation. But yeah, that's the wrap up for my fantasy leagues this week or for week 6. But no, we got to take care of you guys and make sure that you're covered on the latest that's coming out of the NFL so you can prepare for your fantasy week with the information at hand. So let's get right into our news and notes from around the league.
News and notes from around the NFL.
All right, guys, so we have a few injury news tidbits as well as some other notable news. So let's get right into it with this one. Bills coach Sean McDermott said that tight end Dalton Kincaid, who is dealing with an oblique injury, is listed as day-to-day. Now, Dalton Kincaid wasn't able to play against the Atlanta Falcons. It seemed like he popped up on the injury report right before the game. So if you weren't able to get him out of your lineups, that's probably why. I didn't see any reports that he was injured before the game. So it's kind of sucks because they played on Monday Night Football. So you were basically trapped with Dalton Kincaid in your lineup. Or if you managed to see it and then you picked up Dawson Knox, he scored a touchdown, I believe, against the Atlanta Falcons. So, who was starting Dawson Knox? Because I wasn't. No Dawson Knox love over here. All right, keep it rolling. 49ers coach Kyle Shanahan said that Brandon Ayuk is he's getting closer and closer to returning to practice and mentioned week 10 as a rough estimate. Now, initially, Kyle Shanahan estimated that Brandon Ayuk would be ready by week 6. So no week 6 there because it's already week 7. So we just have to wait and see what they're going to do with Brandon Ayuk, if they're going to activate his 21-day window anytime soon, which would be great because the 49ers wide receiver core has been ravaged by injuries. It's ridiculous. Ricky Parasol is hurt. Jawan Jennings says he's playing through broken ribs and other injuries. Jordan Watkins, I believe that's his name. He's been hurt for most of the season, so they need some help. George Kittle hurt. He's supposed to be coming back, and that was my next one. What a segue, right? George Kittle is expected to be back at practice this week, so they are getting some players back, which is a good sign. But yeah, have if you can check your league to make sure that Brandon Ayuk is still out on the waivers, you might want to consider adding him to your injury reserve spot if you have one on your fantasy league. And if you don't have an injury reserve slot or a couple of injury reserve slots in your fantasy league, your commissioner is not doing his job. Y'all should have injury reserve slots on your fantasy lineups just in case somebody gets hurt. One or two, sure, that's cool. If they want to add more, that's fine. But to not have any, that's egregious. You need to holler at your commissioner because that shouldn't be going down like that. Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell says that he's helping J.J. McCarthy, who's dealing with an ankle injury, build his foundation back up. Now, it is possible that J.J. McCarthy could start in Week 7 against the Philadelphia Eagles. Carson Wentz is dealing with a serious shoulder injury, so that's something to look out for. If Carson Wentz can't go, it looks like they may turn back to J.J. McCarthy. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I'm not too keen on J.J. McCarthy coming back. It feels like more of a downgrade for Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Carson Wentz has looked pretty good, being able to help those guys keep their fantasy stock afloat. But without Carson Wentz, if he can't go because of that shoulder, J.J. McCarthy could have a tough time against a Philadelphia Eagles defense that's trying to bounce back after getting mollywopped by the Giants. Yes, I'm going to stick one in there. Mollywopped. They got cooked. Blown out. Beaten down. All right, let me chill. All right. ESPN's Adam Schefter reports that Jets wide receiver Garrett Wilson is going to miss a couple of weeks because of a knee injury. As diagnosed as a hyperextended knee. He did manage to avoid major injury of that knee, so that's a good thing. He's not going to land on, I don't think they're going to be putting him on injury reserve, but he is going to miss a couple of games. And the Jets already don't have a wide receiver core that's deep enough as it is. So, yeah, you're not going to see any Jets players. I mean, you're not going to see any Jets wide receivers, rather, on this episode. So, yeah. And to wrap it up, Panthers head coach Dave Canales said that we'll see when asked if Rico Dowdle has earned the right to be the team's starting running back going forward. Now, if you haven't been paying attention, Chuba Hubbard has missed a couple of games because of calf injury, and Rico Dowdle has gone completely loco the last 2 weeks. So, yeah, it would be great if they stick with Rico Dowdle and let Chuba Hubbard back him up. I'm probably going to wager and say that they're going to go with some kind of split, maybe 50-50 at most. But the way Rico Dowdle has been playing, he's been red hot over the last 2 weeks. And granted, he did play against Miami and the Cowboys defense, and their run defenses are not great. But you still got to go out there and produce. And the fact that he's able to take advantage of these matchups and destroy defenses on the ground or through the air is scary. It really is. If Rico Dowdle keeps this up, he could be a league-winning waiver wire grab for the 2025 fantasy season. Yeesh, I got a couple shares, so I'm like, listen, I don't know what to do with him. Should I trade him? Should I, you know what I'm saying? I'm weighing my options at this point. But that'll wrap it up for the news. Now let's get into our main segment and talk about some options off the waiver wire for Week 7. All right, so I got a couple of names for you guys to make sure that you got some options at these positions. They're kind of on the nose because we talked about them last week, or we've been talking about them, or the fantasy community has been talking about them last week because of the situations that have arisen in their respective teams. But a couple of these guys, especially at the tight end position, there were some nuggets out there that if you were able to jump on them before this week, you're ahead of the game, but they're still rostered at a pretty low percentage. So if you need these guys or you need these particular positions, you should jump on them in this week's waiver claims. And I'm going to start with tight end, Seattle's tight end, AJ Barner, rostered at just 10% of ESPN leagues. He's currently the tight end 11. He's averaging 10.3 fantasy points per game. He's been quietly having some solid games as of late. He's had 4 double-digit fantasy point games over his the first 6 games of the season. The thing about Barner is he's not getting a lot of targets, which is kind of weird. But the Seattle Seahawks, they're more of a balanced team. They're not really asking Sam Darnold to throw a whole bunch of pass attempts in each of these games. So Barner he's only had 13 targets. Excuse me, he's only had 13 targets over his last 3 games. But the best thing about Barner is when you're throwing him the ball, he's coming down with everything. 100% catch rate over in each of his last 3 games. Let me say that right. In each of his last 3 games, he's caught everything that's gone his way. Now, could he get more targets? I certainly hope so, because it seems like Sam Darnold likes to target him, especially in the red zone, because he's already got 4 touchdowns on the season. So if they can continue to build on that relationship and Sam Darnold continues to look his way, because Cooper Kupp has had some decent games, but it's basically Jackson Smith and Jigma and then everybody else. So hopefully AJ Barner can get on and continue at the pace that he's going, because he's really producing despite the fact that he's not getting a high volume of targets. So if you need AJ Barner, he's out there. Like I said, he's only rostered in 10% of ESPN leagues. So he's a guy that you want to grab if you are looking for a tight end. Now, here's one that, like I said, is a little more obvious, because we kind of the fantasy community's kind of been talking about him. We already know the situation that the Chargers are in because of Amarian Hampton going out and landing on injury reserve because he suffered an ankle injury. He's expected to miss the next 4 to 6 weeks. At least that was the report in the beginning. But now, recent reports have said that he could miss more time outside of the 4 to 6 week window for the injury reserve, which is not, of course, a great sign. But there was speculation about who was going to be the new running back, if there was going to be a lead running back, or if they were going to have a committee approach with between Hassan Haskins and Kamani Vidal. And Vidal took his opportunities and he took off with the job, at least based on what he was able to do in week 6. 18 carries, 124 yards, and a receiving touchdown. Like I said, we all thought that it was going to be some kind of committee. They were going to split reps. At least that's what the Chargers coaches were alluding to. But Vidal just looked like the more explosive back between the two. So they gave him the workload to be able to go out there and produce a stellar line for week 6. Now, Vidal is only rostered in 27% of ESPN leagues, so he's still available out there. He's going to be one of the hotter waiver wire targets for week 7, especially for the running back position, because if you have a few injuries on your roster, you're looking to supplement that. So you're going to go out and get Vidal. Plain and simple. You need to go pick him up. Even if they do go back to a committee, Vidal's receiving ability, he's more explosive than Haskins, or at least he showed that in week 6. You got to pick him up. And I'll say this too. Even if you don't need a guy, you should try and make a claim and pick him up. If you can put them on your bench, if you have the space, go ahead and do it. And you're like, well, what if I don't really need him? Well, I'm already deep at running back. Go get him anyway. Because that way, you take a player that somebody else might need, and then you got him for yourself. And then they got to come to you if they want to, make a trade or do something like that. So always take advantage of the waiver wire, even if you don't need a player. That's, a little nugget right there. Now, another running back that's made it on this list this week is Bam Knight, Arizona Cardinals running back. Similar situation. Trey Benson landed on injury reserve. James Conner's out for the season. So the Arizona Cardinals are turning to Bam Knight now. Now, this is the thing that kind of kind of ticked me off because they didn't say anything before, all the way up until right before the game started, that Bam Knight was going to be the new lead running back and Michael Carter was going to be the backup. Now they're just confusing fantasy managers because everybody invested in Michael Carter, who had a pretty decent game in his first start. Then they switched to Bam Knight. Like, what's next? Are they going to give Amari DeMarcado a chance to redeem himself, and then he's going to be the lead back for the week 7? Like, don't do stuff like that. If you're going to do it one way, or if you're going to say, hey, man, we're going to let this guy rock out, let him rock out. He didn't have a bad game. Just give him more work. But, they're going to do some kind of shuffling at this point. Just be clear with it so everybody can be prepared to make the moves. Like, when the news went off, I'm up here checking through my leagues, and one of my league mates already beat me to the punch. I'm like, dang, how did you beat me? I'm normally the guy that does that, but I got beat to the punch, so I can't get Bam Knight inside in a couple of my leagues. But Bam Knight was announced the starter for week 6 against the Indianapolis Colts. He did finish with 54 total yards and a touchdown, which is, again, not bad, especially for his first start. The one thing to note, though, is that Carter wasn't far behind him in terms of yards, because they both rushed for 34 yards on the ground, but Carter did it in less carries. Just something to keep in mind. Like I said, they're probably still going to lean towards having both of them being involved in the Arizona Cardinals offense. Kyler Murray is dealing with a foot injury. We don't know when he's going to return. Jacoby Brissett he looked really surprisingly good against the Colts in his he's a journeyman guy, so he's started before, but in his first start with the Arizona Cardinals, he threw for over 300 yards against the Colts, so that's pretty good. But yeah, Bam Knight, 6% roster. You need a running back, go get him. Plain and simple. And another guy, back to the tight end position, and I want to say that this particular guy, I think fantasy managers should really consider picking him up off the waiver wire. Mason Taylor, tight end for the New York Jets. Taylor was on the upswing until week 6. He played the Denver Broncos. They went sack crazy on Justin Fields. I feel bad for Justin Fields because he got his bell rung. I don't know what the Jets offensive line was thinking, but 9 sacks or something crazy like that? Ridiculous. Justin Fields couldn't get out of the way. They were going off on him. But Garrett Wilson is down. He's going to miss a couple weeks, like we mentioned in our news segment. So this gives Taylor an opportunity to get those extra targets because, like I mentioned before, the Jets don't really have a deep wide receiver core. So this is a perfect opportunity for Mason Taylor to be that new number 1 target for Justin Fields, hopefully to get the ball out quicker. He should hopefully get more receptions or more targets and more receptions because you're trying to get downfield, shortening the game so you hit those quick passes to the tight end over the middle, trying to move the ball upfield. Breece Hall is definitely going to be a what's the word I'm looking for? He's going to get the ball a lot. So, I wanted to use a different word, but I can't think of it. So he's definitely going to be a beneficiary of Garrett Wilson not being on the field. So the ball has to go somewhere. See, I finally got it out. But yeah, one thing to note is that Taylor has seen at least 6 targets over the last 4 weeks outside of the Denver game. So he's been getting pretty involved in the Jets offense, being one of the main targets for Justin Fields. And I think that's going to continue, especially now that Garrett Wilson is out. And then my final guy for this episode, we got to talk about Luther Burden. Now, yeah, I don't know. I thought I saw something that wasn't there. But yeah, Luther Burden, we got to talk about him. 8% roster. He's kind of buried on the Chicago Bears depth chart. You have DJ Moore, who's out in front. Romo Dunze is having a great season. So it makes sense that Luther Burden is not seeing a lot of work. But DJ Moore did go down with what's now being called a groin injury. He looked a little hobbled around that first quarter, late into the first quarter. He stayed in the game, but then he ended up having to go to the hospital. They went and checked him out, and it was revealed to be a groin injury. But Luther Burden could be a beneficiary of DJ Moore if he cannot play in week 7. So that's a consideration to why fantasy managers may want to consider picking him up. Olamide Zaccheaus did not play great against the Washington Commanders in week 6. He had a couple of bad drops during the game, finished the game with just 4 yards receiving. Burden was the best wide receiver on the field in the game, finished with 51 yards on 4 catches. He averaged 12.8 yards per reception against the Washington Commanders. Burden looks like a guy who demands more work, but for whatever reason, Ben Johnson just doesn't want to use him right now. I'm not understanding why they feel like Zaccheaus should be on the field over Burden, but hopefully that changes with Moore. If he does, like I said, miss any time, this will be a perfect opportunity for Burden to cement himself. And we've seen flashes of Burden be able to play at a high level. Granted, he cooked my Cowboys, but that's a perfect example of being able to take advantage of an opportunity when it presents itself, even against a bad defense. Because if you can't do it against a bad defense, how can I expect you to do it against a good one? So he took advantage of that. He had over 100 yards in that game against the Cowboys a couple weeks ago. Burden is a guy who needs to see the field more, and hopefully this performance, though, the wide receivers for the Chicago Bears kind of struggled against the Commanders, more than likely due to the weather. It started raining in the middle of the game. But Burden is showing you how dangerous he can be as a weapon. Get him on the field. Let Caleb Williams and Luther Burden gel and become another weapon for that Bears offense to go to the next level. I don't see why this is such a tough decision. Granted, he is a rookie, but he's been able to produce. You just got to give him the work. But those are my options for this week, for week 7's waiver wire targets. If I see any more, best believe I will be posting about them on thefantasyfinest.com for an extra article for this week. So stay tuned for that, especially if you need some more options. But that will do it for this episode, guys. Thank you for checking us out. As always, I appreciate all the comments. If you need help trying to set your lineups, you need some questions answered, some start sits and stuff like that, always leave comments on our social media pages, and I will get to you as soon as possible. I've been answering questions on TikTok, trying to get YouTube started jumping. So I'm going to start making some more posts geared to starts and sits exclusively, so that way you have a place that you can congregate and put your questions in there so I can respond and answer to them. But like I always say, thank you guys for checking out the episode, and I will see you in the next one. And until then, peace out.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy's Finest podcast. Be sure to join the community on Facebook and follow us on Twitter too at the Fantasy's Finest. See you next episode.